4 days ago, South Africa marked Reconciliation Day. The flags were raised, speeches were delivered, and once again we were reminded of the promise we made to ourselves as a nation, a promise of healing, unity, and shared humanity. But once the day passed and daily life resumed, the deeper questions remained. What does reconciliation look like now? And how far have we come truly? Years into democracy, old wounds still surface in new ways. Social tensions remain visible, trust is often fragile, and dialogue across difference can feel harder than ever. Reconciliation, it seems, is not something we complete, it is something we must continuously choose. So this afternoon on Weekend Review, we return to that conversation, and not as a commemoration, but as reflection. So let's unpack all of this. I'm joined by Reverent Frank Chikane of the Apostolic Faith Mission Church in South Africa. Good afternoon, Mfundis, and thank you for your time. So let's talk about Reconciliation Day. There's the symbolism of the day, then there's the content of the project of reconciliation that we've been undertaking since we chose the path of democratic South Africa. What are your broad reflections about the continued importance of having the day, having the symbolism, while also undertaking the work, the content work?
Well, the first thing I must say is that it's important to have a day so that you can always be reminded about where we come from, where we are, and where we need to be going. And so the day is of vital importance. Secondly, is that this day was really fraught with difficult issues like, the Dinga's Day and, Blood River. And it has historical significance, but in a very negative way. And so we try to also make sure that the new generation knows about what happened, but knows where we are going and where we should be going. But I must say, in my view, we planned for this process before 94. Many people would not know that. But those of us who are in the churches, South African Council of Churches, etc., raised the questions and had workshops about what happens if peace is reached, agreements are reached, and people were fighting each other, and now they must live together. I think we went through that. The liberation movement also did the same. And so when we came together, we knew that we have to integrate the armed forces. People have forgotten that. The people who were fighting had to be integrated. The intelligence services had to be integrated. Not much at the police level, because the liberation movement doesn't keep a huge police facility. And then we had to integrate the public service to make sure that we work together, whites and blacks in the same environment. Where the challenge is, we've done all that. This country is quite extraordinary in that regard. The fact that I would have a guest from outside the country and who has to be secured when I was in government.
Yeah.
And I go to that meeting and I meet the guy who was involved in my torture as part of the police force.
Yeah.
And so we come from far. People shouldn't take it for granted that it was an easy one.
Yeah.
But now the problem is more at an economic level for me.
Yeah, Reverend, let
me
pick up on that point about the problem being at the economic level, because from what you're describing in the formative years of our democracy, it sounds like you had no choice but to be intentional about which symbols you were choosing, the symbolism of the day, integration as you have described. How do we approach the reconciliation project as it now relates to the issue of justice being the foundation of this reconciliation?
Yeah, I think that's where people miss it. You see, they make reconciliation a superficial issue. You sat around a table, had dinner together, so you are reconciled. The problem is that apartheid caused a deep damage in this country over centuries. And that there are people who are victims of this system. It empowered others and disempowered others. It enriched some and impoverished others. And so part of the reconciliation was that we should make sure that the damage of the past does not show up into the future. And so, for instance, we need to make sure that poverty is not associated with Black people. We need to make sure that unemployment is not associated with Black people. We need to be able to change the conditions, and in the liberation language, we call it national democratic liberation, so that we level the playing fields, we bring people from the bottom up, and when you bring them up, those who are at the top need to make sacrifices. There's no way of correcting this without actually those who are privileged making a contribution in this process. And if we had that, we would not be having the types of troubles, violence, killings that we have today.
Yeah.
But what did not happen, it's that those who had did not think they needed to make any sacrifices. Even the issue of land, for instance, we should have resolved this matter long time ago and not have it with us today.
Yeah.
And so that's really the challenge for the future. And as long as people are unemployed, the economy, people are not participating in the economy, they are unemployed, we cannot have peace into the future and stability. So the people who are endowed with resources who benefited during the apartheid era must have interest in making sure that those who are excluded are included. That's
Yeah.
your insurance for the future. There's no other way.
So, to what extent do you believe some of the events that we've seen this year have tested that resolve to stay the cause by everyone involved in nation building and this reconciliation project? For instance, the sense of betrayal that some feel about certain groupings, lobby groups, and their role in international affairs and how South Africa is projected. How does that weigh in, as well as some of the grappling we've had to do with the project, for example, of not restitution, but empowerment of historically disadvantaged South Africans, the extent to which buy-in continues to be there or is waning faster than we would be willing to see it?
Yeah, now let me start with the first question you raised. I mean, these fellow South Africans who never accepted change. Remember, there were people within the white community who never accepted change. They still believe that they had the right to colonize us, oppress us, disadvantage us. And when you try to correct what went wrong in the past, they see that as an attack on them. Now, fortunately, they are a minority. I mean, they are not the majority. The majority of white people in this country see things differently, even amongst the Afrikaners, which Trump is talking about, see things differently. I mean, I'm still amazed that the world could allow a president of a superpower to lie openly with no facts and threaten a country. I mean, it's unbelievable that it would happen. But in any way, the people who are complaining are people who are privileged. You know, if you, this is easy to explain. When I was teaching in a class some time ago, I said to them, if you had 20 people, 20% of the people who had the right to apply for a job, and they got it amongst them, one of them gets it, But if you allowed the other 80% to apply for the same job, the probability of getting that job becomes less and less. And therefore, you can't remain being a privileged 20% or a privileged 10%. You lose something somewhere because you were privileged. And I think it's high time that people understand that there's nobody in this country who's being victimized. There's nobody. Actually, this country is a miracle that, there have been no action to retribution against anybody. And I'm hoping that there are more and more white South Africans who take a stand and dissociate themselves from this type of behavior. On the economic transformation, that's a much more difficult task because government can do what it needs to do. When I was in government, the first 10 years, we worked so hard to change things. And the report, if you go to the 10-year review of that period, it must have been around 2004. It will say that which government could do has been done. But where we needed partnership with business, it did not happen. And that's where the crisis was. And
Reverend,
that's where the issues,
Yeah, I do apologize. I do need to end it there. I'm completely out of time, but I do believe we covered extensive ground this afternoon. And thank you for making the time for the conversation. Reverend Frank Chikane of the Apostolic Faith Mission Church.